Hello everyone, welcome back. So I received a comment a few days ago from a user named Thor's Hammer, which I'm putting on screen right now. And I thought it was an excellent suggestion for a video, so I pushed back a few other ideas I had so I would make this video instead. It's a question, which I'm ashamed to say, I've never really thought about too much in the past. And whilst I'm doing the War in Middle-earth series, it definitely makes sense to make a video that addresses how Morgoth and Sauron were able to raise such massive armies of orcs. So thank you, Thor's Hammer, for your awesome suggestion. Like many things in the Tolkienverse, Tolkien doesn't give definitive answers that lay out in great detail all of his ideas and theories when it comes to orcs. However, like with many other of his ideas, there's lots of hints and implications in the text that allow us to craft what might be a relatively accurate narrative. So first, a bit about orc biology, and this isn't going to be pleasant. So orcs reproduce much the same as other races. There are female orcs and baby orcs. And I didn't really want to find images of this, so I have some pictures from Warcraft instead. Orcs aren't born from mud like they are depicted as being in the films. But interestingly enough, one of Tolkien's original theories on orcs was that they were born of heat and slime. So yeah, fun fact. Anyway, the existence of female orcs and baby orcs really does raise the question of whether orc genocide is ethical. But quite frankly, that's probably a question we should ignore. So orcs seemingly reproduce the same, so how are there so many of them compared to other races? Well, this is where we have to look at orc culture. Although Tolkien struggled with this moral dilemma, the end result appears to be that orcs are inherently evil, or at least close enough to the point of where it makes zero difference. Orcish culture, if you could call it that, is pretty much entirely based around violence and destruction. When orcs aren't fighting the other races, they're usually just fighting each other. Even a somewhat redeeming quality of orcs, the fact that they can be quite cunning and inventive, also circles back around to war, as they use those skills to create weapons and machines of war. So in other words, orcish culture and society is entirely self-destructive, being entirely based on war. This throws back to the origin of orcs and the fact that they were pretty much created as a weapon by Morgoth. This is important because a weapon is only as good as the hand that wields it. Give a sword to someone who's never used a sword before and they'll probably be quite useless. Give a sword to, say, I don't know, a Dark Lord of Middle-earth, and that sword becomes a lot more potent. You see, orcs, when left to their own self-destructive devices, aren't the same threat they are when guided by a powerful hand. In the absence of a powerful figure, orcs are usually just a localized or regional threat. Throughout much of the Second and Third Age, orcs are pretty much a non-factor due to their diminished numbers and lack of coherent leadership. But this changes when they're united by a powerful force, whether that be Morgoth, Sauron, Saruman, the Witch King, or even powerful orcish chieftains like Azog or Bolg. Without a powerful leader, orcs are chaotic and self-destructive, but when they are led by a firm hand, they're usually quite industrious and efficient, probably due to the constant threat of death more than anything else. Suddenly, orcs go from being a minor threat to a major one, and these small, squabbling tribes that hide in the mountains quickly swell to massive armies with bottomless pools of manpower and global power projection. This is where the theory crafting begins. So, how does this happen? Well, it's simple, mass breeding. It's a horrid thought, for a multitude of reasons, but it makes sense. Despite knowing they exist, as far as we know, no female orcs actually make an appearance. Or maybe they do, and we just can't tell the difference. Anyway, this leads to a strong assumption that they all remain at home. And what do they do at home? Well, the seemingly endless hordes of orcs have to come from somewhere. And in a society that is always in a state of total war, there are few better ways to contribute than to give birth to the soldiers that fight those wars. So, the existence of female orcs is probably pretty grim, even when compared to male orcs. At least with male orcs, you get to run out and die straight away. The main strength of orcs is in their quantity, and a mass breeding program would allow orcs to rapidly outpace the birth rates of their enemies like men, elves, and dwarves, whose birth rates are already quite low in comparison. And even more importantly, those orcs that are being born are inevitably also going to contribute to that same war industry, whether as labourers, breeders, or soldiers. There are no artists, farmers, shopkeepers, craftsmen, and builders of non-war related instruments, singers, servants, all of which you would find in elven, mannish, or dwarven societies. In orcish society, everyone would contribute to the pursuit of war, meaning that soldiers alone would make up a huge portion of the orcish population. The more orcs that are being born, the more exponential their growth becomes, which explains, for example, why Morgoth was able to so quickly replenish his losses during the latter years of the First Age. With these mass breeding programs in place, Orcish armies would be able to swell to massive sizes in a small period of time, especially compared to their opposing races. This is why their armies would so greatly outnumber the armies of men, elves, and dwarves, and why their armies would often recover much quicker. However, it's notable that whenever their leader is overthrown, whether that be Sauron or Morgoth or the Witch King in Angmar, Orcs end up fading into irrelevancy once again. This would be because these mass breeding programs are completely manufactured and unnatural, and would likely fall apart very quickly as Orcish society once again descends into chaos. So there you have it. Why were Orcish armies so large? Most likely, mass breeding. Although in saying that, Tolkien never says this himself, but it seems very, very likely. I hope that has answered questions, maybe some of which you never had, or never thought to have, and maybe provided some context, and maybe next time I talk about massive orc armies, you'll think of female orcs in the darkest pits of Mordor engaging in sexual activity that is totally based on love and not the hatred of all things good. I'll stop right there. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, or at least found it interesting. War in Middle-earth in the Second Age will be back soon, and remember, orcs don't spring out of holes in the ground, only dwarves do.